we're recording.
Yep, we're on the first slide.
Okay, fab. All right.
Let's start then. So hi guys, this is our talk we were planning to give you over Zoom, but for some reason it's not working for us. So here it is, recorded for you guys on YouTube. So basically what we were planning to do, we were planning on just talking about the interview that you guys are having at Cambridge for medicine. We were planning on telling you who we are, what they're looking for, the purpose of the interview, the type of interview, some tips, and we were planning on giving you some examples and answering any questions you'd hopefully have. So yeah, the aim of this whole talk is just help with any issues you might have, make you feel less scared, pass on any information that would be of help to all you guys. So yeah, just a quick disclaimer. This webinar was put together by us instead of the admissions tutors. So it's mainly based on like our experience of what Cambridge are looking for. And this will vary from college to college and the year of admission. So for example, I had different types of interviews to say Shivani and Rahul. And also we are not actually employed by the university to give this talk, or we're affiliated by them.
Yeah, so if we're just introducing ourselves then, I'm Shivani. I'm a third year medic at CATS.
Hi everyone, I'm Rahul. I'm a third year medic at Downing College.
And then I'm Naz, and I'm a third year medic at Gombling Keys College.
So if we get into the real meat of this video, then the whole interview process is between tutors who, if you get in, will supervise you and yourself. So they're looking for students that they think have a lot of academic ability, but also quite a lot of potential, and people that will benefit from being in that Cambridge and Oxford learning environment. And so it's the sort of thing where your interview is almost like a mini supervision. It's a chance for them to see whether or not you'll fit into this environment, to see if you'll enjoy learning here, and whether or not in turn the actual tutors themselves will like teaching you and will enjoy it. And so the questions that they ask you at interviews, I'm sure you've heard all about how weird they are, but they're really done to see how you think, how good you are at problem solving, what you're like taking new ideas on board and how you can apply them, and just how good you are at analyzing either data, logic, or new information. Next slide, please. Oh shit. So the medical interview. So there are two kind of main interview styles there are. So there's the medical interview where they'll talk about perhaps current affairs like COVID-19. I imagine there'll be quite a few COVID-19 questions. But the majority of the time, they'll introduce a concept about the human body or a clinical concept, and then they'll work through it with you. So one thing could be potential treatments of COVID-19, although that would be kind of a mean question. They may also ask you to talk about what your interests are within medicine. So it's quite a broad field, and it is crucial that you're able to discuss this thoroughly, because, for example, in mine, I talked a bit about an article I'd read about CRISPR, and literally the rest of that half of the interview was spent talking about genetics, gene editing, and that kind of thing. If I'd said something very different, like I talked about cardiology, for example, they'd very much have taken the interview a different way. So they're quite flexible. So they want you to be genuine in your interests, because you'll be able to talk about it much more easily. And also in the medical interview, they can ask you questions regarding A-level science, and then want you to apply it in a medical context. For example, like if this is an action potential that you've learned about, how may or in what scenarios would it be useful to like stop action potentials from firing, and stuff to do with anesthesia, for example. So that's kind of the medical interview. The next type of interview is like the science interview. So this is mainly based on, I'd say more AS than A2 science, but there's also quite a bit on GCSE science, and particularly a bit of maths and physics. You can be asked to like draw graphs or to rearrange simple physics equations to help you get to one of your answers. But it's important to state that what they're looking for is that you have a good, solid basis in science, and that you're able to develop new ideas from there, rather than knowing any finer details like the exact enzyme that's involved in X pathway. They want to know perhaps how this pathway works and how we can use it, how you could target it, for example.
Okay, so I'm just going to go through some of the tips for an online interview, which may be unfamiliar to a lot of you, and to be honest, is fairly unfamiliar to us as well. So the main thing is to treat it like an in-person interview. So have your phone turned off and don't use Google. Don't try to use any kind of other things, basically, because the interview is basically mainly to show your thought process and your working and how you reach an answer, as opposed to the actual answer. So there's no point really Googling the answer to get there directly. Try and make sure you've tested out the tech before, that you're comfortable with it. And there are more videos on our Linktree which will give you more advice on this. They might ask you to show your working out, especially if you're having to draw graphs for the science interview. So try and keep some pen and paper nearby so that you can just quickly sketch a graph out and show the interviewer, for example. A touchscreen device might be helpful if you wanted to join from your iPad as well, for example, but you know, the protocol on this might vary from college to college, so it might be best to ask your you know, the admissions tutor in advance or something. But yeah, so those are the main tips for an online interview. Now for the interview in general, as I said before, the main thing is to talk through your thought process out loud as much as possible, because they can only help you if they can hear kind of what you're thinking and your method, and then they can correct your method at the exact point where you're getting stuck. And they want to see mainly that they can teach you to in the future, not that you've already learned everything in advance. So don't worry if a friend already knows loads about cardiology or a specific topic, because it doesn't really matter. It's all about the potential to be taught, because they're there to teach you. And a common thing to say is that the interview only really starts when you don't know what to do, because the aim of the interviewer is to kind of find a field that you're not maybe familiar with, or a problem that you don't know how to solve, and see if you're able to apply basic principles and previous understanding to then get to the answer. So don't be afraid, basically, if you don't know what the answer is straight away, because that's completely normal. So yeah, so make sure to say, you know, I'm not too sure about this, and the interviewer will happily give you some more advice and, you know, guide you from there, because the whole point that it's sort of like a mini supervision, and in supervisions you will definitely not always know the answer. Be genuine as well. Yeah, don't try to over rehearse too much and think there's an exact way of doing things, and yeah, take it lightly. So, you know, if it doesn't go that well, then it's completely fine. Just try and clear your head and, you know, use it as prep for the next interview. Okay, so we've got two examples here of interview questions they could ask. So Rahul, do you want to do the first one on HIV?
Yeah. So this is quite similar to what I was asked in my interview. So I was kind of just asked a very general question of what is HIV? And so a kind of simple answer could be just that HIV is a retrovirus, and where a retrovirus is a virus that has a reverse transcriptase enzyme which converts RNA into DNA. But ultimately, this kind of thing, this kind of broad question they're asking, from my opinion at least, is them trying to suss out what you know about a topic. So it'd kind of be better to say like, yes, HIV is a retrovirus. You could talk about like what happens with if you have HIV for a prolonged period and you get prolonged death of your T cells, and that leads to AIDS. And then you could talk a little bit about AIDS. You could talk a bit about how it's spread, because it's a sexually transmitted disease. And you know, you could potentially talk about how it replicates as well. So one of the follow-up questions I got asked was, how do you think it replicates, after I said all of that? And I was lucky in that we'd done this in school, but at the same time, it's the sort of thing that they could walk you through it. So one way they might do is like, okay, you said it's an RNA virus. We have DNA, as humans, we have DNA genomes. How do you think HIV replicates? So then that's where they're looking for you to kind of apply what you know about how RNA is first made in like normal mammalian cells, and like what happens to mRNA or just RNA in general once it's been made. So briefly, HIV can encode a RNA polymerase to make more of its own RNA genome, and that's mainly how it replicates. With regards to this year with COVID, they could ask you how its replication is different from coronaviruses. It's not really, but the reverse transcriptase means that you can have HIV integrating into the host cell's genome, and when that cell divides, the HIV genome will also be replicated, but that's not the main method. And then for why it's not different, they'd kind of just be looking for speculations here, because this is, they'd very much not expect you to know what this is. So you could potentially just say something like, oh, it's you make RNA much more rapidly in a cell than you do DNA, or just something like that. And if you go through that, and obviously a bit more detail than we have here, you'll do really well in your interview.
Yeah, so the second question is sort of the interview question I had, which is, why might a healthy person faint when it's hot? And I remember being really stuck with this kind of question and didn't know where to start. But if you go through it step by step using the principles that you already know, then it becomes a lot more manageable. So if you start with changes that like Rahul said, you can just treat it as a conversation starter basically, and think about, oh, well, when it's hot, what do I know happens in thermoregulation? And from A-level biology, you might know that, you sweat and hairs lie flat and you have vasodilation. And once you hit the right kind of line of thinking with vasodilation, they'll encourage you and push you down that line of thinking and say, okay, well, if you know that vasodilation happens, then what would you imagine happens to blood pressure? And if that happens, then you can say, oh, well, I would imagine that blood pressure would fall if there's vasodilation. And then after that, they might ask you, well, where does blood pressure fall? And then you start thinking a bit more. And if you're lucky, you might get straight to the answer, where it would be that a fall in blood pressure, the brain, is what causes you to faint. And there you got the answer. But even if it takes you a while to get there, as long as they can guide you down that path and hear your thinking to kind of get you there, then it's completely fine. So don't be afraid to treat it like a conversation between you and the supervisor, and kind of a bit of a back and forth where they're guiding you and you're working off of what they give you. And any advice they give you is not going to be, a trick. So whatever they're saying is going to be leading you down the right path. So definitely listen to what they say and work off of the tips they're giving you basically in the interview.
Yeah, so just to finally answer a few commonly asked questions. Well, first one is, what should I say if they ask, do you have any questions for us? And in my personal opinion, you can use this as a way to find out more, and use this to really show, differentiate yourself from other candidates. So you don't want to waste this kind of question on something you can easily research online. For example, what the supervisor's field is or things like that. Maybe say you're doing the question about HIV. as Rahul mentioned before, you could ask further into anything you're interested in, and really try and show yourself as to be a really strong candidate. Another question people commonly ask is, will they ask me things I don't know? So like, can I say I don't know? And to be honest, I feel like the whole point of the interview is for them to find out what you don't know, so they can start seeing how you think when you don't know something, and if you're using the basic principles and first principles. And it's completely fine to say I don't know, if you really honestly have nowhere to start, because the supervisors aren't there to like grill you, they're there to help you. They want the best for you, so like they will help you along the way and guide you, not by like straight up giving the answer, but they will help you and guide you by giving you clues of sort. In terms of what you need to know, I feel like it's just have a sound knowledge of your A-level sciences, not the exact detail of every single chemical bond and everything like that, but general basic first principles. You should have a sound knowledge of that, and the frameworks of A-level sciences, and also have some knowledge of GCSE physics, and some statistics would really help, and allow you to really like answer these questions to the best of your ability. Finally, does your PMAT score matter? Absolutely not. It absolutely does not matter. Like, people here who have like unreal 8s and 9s and BMATs, but also people on the exact opposite end of that whole statistical distribution who got like 3s and 2s. So BMAT score is one factor they use to differentiate between candidates, but also they especially in Cambridge as well, they mainly use the interview to decide which candidates are better suited for Cambridge. Yeah, and if you got any other questions, feel free to like message the social medias and the website, which you'll see in the next slide here.
Yeah. So this is just a summary slide, as Naz said, with like all of our social media and the website and things like that. A little bit about AIM and kind of what the aim is, and that sort of thing. So I think we're done. Is there anything else you guys want to add?
No, I think particularly no.
Yeah, so as Naz said, just like feel free to reach out and ask any questions that you have. But I think that's it.